It's wonderful to see everyone here. Welcome. Can everyone hear me? Fantastic. So we're going to talk about decision making. But first, let's start with a little quick exercise. And you don't have to give me the answer. But here's the question. Are you a good driver? For those of you who drive, do you think you're like average, below average, or above average driver? Just think about that. So international studies across multiple countries have said that the number of people who think they're above average drivers is between 70 and 90%. So just think about that. So if you think you're above average, I mean, I think I'm above average driver. Of course, I'm above average in just about everything. So basically, studies show that we all think we're like above average in many things. And we're really not. Because statistically, we're all average. We're special, just like everybody else. And so the next question I pose to you, like, how good do you think you're at making decisions, or like rational decisions? I think I'm above average. Many of you might think we're above average, but it's just like being a driver. We're really not as good as we think we are, and we can all work to be a little bit better. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Think about how we make decisions. We're going to look at how our subconscious mind affects our decisions without us even knowing. And then how we can learn to make decisions a little bit better. So to get us started, and I see Gleb passed around some notepads very helpfully, let's take a few minutes and think of some decisions that you made in the past and just write them down and see how they turned out for you. Like, what was the situation? And we're going to talk about that later. Like, do you feel the decision like went well, didn't go so well? And also think about in the future, what are some decisions that might be like coming up in the future? And kind of where are you leaning with those decisions? And so I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about that. First of all, like, what is a decision? It's like a point in time we make a decision. But it's in the rest of our life, we have the before to the decision. We make a decision, and there's the after. It's kind of very basic and simple. You know, like we're like in first grade, of course, that's what happens. There's a before and after. But how do we know if a decision is a good decision? Does it get us to the after that we want? Because while we're making a decision, there might be a lot going on. You know, like for example, one decision I'm thinking about is like, I'm considering visiting my parents who live 500 miles away. And so visiting them would probably take like 2-3 days, $400, and you know, for an introvert like me, like quite a big investment of my energy. But also like they're my parents, I love them, I don't see them very often, and my mom has been ill, so I kind of feel like it's hard to decide. It's hard for me to say, like, I'm not going to visit my parents. What kind of a horrible child am I? What kind of a horrible, heartless person am I? My parents gave me life. On the other hand, like, what will happen after? Will they be upset? Will they not care? You know, will I regret missing something, you know, that weekend that I, you know, visited them? So it's important for me to think about my goals. Now, what are my goals? To have a good relationship with my parents, to have a balance in my life. You know, how do I want to spend my time? So that's kind of what goes into. So when we think, like, was it a good decision or a bad decision? Did it get us to the future that we wanted? And of course, we also have the past, the before. You know, last time I did visit my parents, they were not happy. Last time I didn't call them for more than a week. They're like, is everything okay? We were just worried. We haven't heard from you. I'm like, I'm sorry. I should have called you. I love you. So there are many things before that kind of affect us. And then after, where do we want to go? So that's kind of like decisions. And we want to really, we can all get a little better about the middle part. So like being above average driver, you know, even the best and brightest of us, we can always get better at making decisions. Even the best and brightest of us make little errors, and even not so little errors, that we don't even realize we make until it's after and it's too late and it's not what we wanted. And so what I want to talk about is some interesting ways that our mind works that actually affects how we think about decisions and how we make them. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of a well-known psychologist. His name is Daniel Kahneman. I'm going to write it down so that you can all look him up if you want. and he has a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. So Daniel Kahneman actually won the Nobel Prize in economics about 10 years ago. And later he put some of his ideas into this book, for the rest of us who don't read, dense economics papers. And he's a psychologist, and he suggests that in our mind there are two different types of thinking, System 1 and System 2. And so we're going to talk about the difference between them. And it's kind of a new thing, but to me it was so immensely helpful, and I hope it will help you too. And so one way to think about them is System 1 is the automatic brain, kind of like the subconscious automatic stuff in our mind. And then System 2 is the conscious, intentional thinking that we're aware of. So I'm going to write that down. System 1 automatic. Oops. Is intentional. So System 1 is kind of where our emotions take place, our feelings, our impressions. It's really, really fast. It's really intuitive. It operates automatically. It operates all the time. It never takes a break. And we don't even have to control it. Like, it's there. You're sleeping, it's there. You awake, it's there. It's there all the time. It's kind of weird because all the stuff that's happening without our awareness, I think it's kind of weird, but it's true. Now, what does System 2 do? It's the slower, more deliberative, more logical part of our brain. It's when we make decisions, where we think, we interact with others. Like if I think, like, what am I? Like, who am I as a person? That's all System 2. We're barely aware of what's happening here. And so, whereas we think of ourselves as all being System 2, this intentional, conscious brain, it's actually not working nearly as much as that one. It's kind of in a more kind of low effort mode a lot of the time. And if there's nothing to trigger System 2, if everything kind of goes as expected in our environment, it might not even get triggered. So if something is, pleasant and nice and comfortable, System 2 doesn't really have to get involved. So kind of think about that for a moment. The thing that we think is the most important about us, it's not even controlling so much that's happening to us in so many of our thoughts. Some other things that System 2 does is, again, decisions, the effortful activities that we do, our beliefs, our choices, our value systems. Right now, it's working for all of us, of course, System 2. So that's kind of, so how do they work? Again, System 1, automatically all the time. It's on all the time. And that kind of works because we don't want to spend so much energy. It's an evolutionary adaptation. So that unless it's really necessary, System 2 doesn't turn on because it's hard to use. We get tired. Like, this is 2 hours, I hope, I know it can be long to make it through, this kind of meeting. So it kind of conserves our energy to not use System 2 all that much. It does monitor and control our behavior. We can't use this side to make changes to this side. We have to work on it. For example, the workshop that's coming up, the memory, that's how we use System 2 to change our System 1. Because most of the memories we make, we don't have to stop really hard and make them. Last time I had an amazing, sandwich, I didn't stop and try to remember this moment. My mind, I can't help forget it. It was so delicious. But we can make changes to our System 1, to our automatic, if we work on it. So what are some things that engage this intentional part of our brain when there's some kind of difficulty in System 1? I don't know if it happens to you, but anytime I see a person who I'm not sure if they're male or female, my System 1 is like, I'm confused. For better or for worse, I can't stop thinking about the identity of this person, Or if someone, if I get an identified ice cream flavor, or if it looks pink and it tastes like mint, I expect it to be strawberry, but it's mint. Shocked, uncomfortable, what's going on? So system 2 gets engaged. What else? System 2 also comes into play when we feel like we're about to make an error, or we're in a stressful situation and we really need to think about it. Obviously, like, taking a test or talking to, a stranger, talking to someone, they say something we didn't expect, Of course, in the daily interactions, you're checking out, in the grocery store, you might not even, remember what that person looked like 2 minutes later because you're just like running on autopilot. So what does this all mean to us? What does this all mean? That this is really what runs our lives. We don't really realize it. And this is the subconscious automatic part that is really prone to some of these thinking errors, what we call fallacies and biases. It's really prone. It can make them all the time, and we might not even realize it at all, unless we stop and think about it. But we can't stop and think about things all the time. We can always be super alert. I'm about to make an error. I'm about to think about something in an incorrect way. So we have to, we have to balance this. We may not be aware of errors, but we can start to recognize situations where they might creep up on us and kind of turn on our intentional mind at that point and do our best. And even Daniel Kahneman in his book, he says he's like the preeminent expert on this, kind of research, and he says, it's just impossible. It's just impossible to always prevent all the errors that happen here. It's just not possible. We have to find a balance. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. But we can always be better. So I guess none of us are 100% rational. None of us are 100% wonderful decision makers, and we all have work to do. So that's kind of a framework from which we're going to take our conversation on decision making and how the different parts of our mind work. And so, does anyone have any questions so far? Yes, Dan.
Did you classify beliefs as being underneath system 2?
Yes, I did. Beliefs, decisions, most everything that we can think of, it's going to be in system 2, because that's the definition of it, that it's the conscious part of our mind. So, what?
System 2, or don't our beliefs operate automatically? I'm confused.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, is because beliefs sometimes will become an automatic response.
So they will sometimes become an automatic response, but they don't have to originate from system 2. They can become an automatic response from from system 1. Because we get so much information from system 1, it doesn't always have to get, this is the first place where a lot of the stuff goes in our mind. It doesn't always have to be approved by system 2 if system 2 doesn't get engaged. But you're right, since some things do come to us to system 2, then they become beliefs, and then they become kind of subconscious.
So you said beliefs are then system 1?
I think they're both.
Okay.
I think they can be both. If somebody wants to,
Well, really, aren't you trying to make your beliefs, move them from system 2 to system 1? So even in your most automatic, unthinking self, you live out what you actually believe?
You can also try to be doing the opposite of trying to re-examine your beliefs and try to move them from system 1 to system 2. So I think that it makes sense that they would operate in both systems. It depends on your intentionality.
Right, and I think what's Dan and a few of the other people might have been getting at too is that system 1, correct me if I'm wrong, is built up over time from things that start system 2, so that when you start out learning violin, you're thinking, you're building muscle memories and thinking about notes,
right.
But you could never be a good musician in that moment.
Right.
So you're trying to build up system 1.
Right, and you build it up over time with anything, with
Yeah.
any kind of exercise.
Yeah.
Musical instrument, I think, is a great example. And then you can never forget. Your muscle memory never goes away. So that's a great example. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So now we're going to talk about some of the errors in thinking that happen over here, and look at a few examples, and look at how we can address them. And I know here many of you have a handout, and I have more to pass out, that lists many of these fallacies. Does anybody need another paper? A paper with the fallacies for your reference? So on the bottom half of the page and on the back, it lists just a few examples. If you go online, you find a list of dozens and dozens and over 100 of these fallacies. And that's, again, why we cannot just possibly be always aware of all of them and correcting from all of them, for all of them. But all of them are examples of things that happen unconsciously in our mind that sway our decisions, whether or not these changes are good for where we want to go with our decisions, where we want to be after. And these errors, they just happen. And not only are we prone to making them, but they can be exploited by others. If other people know that we're prone to making certain kinds of decisions, that we have certain kinds of feelings that influence us, people are going to use it. And they're going to use it for business or for personal gain. And it's kind of another reason why it's important to be beneficial, to be aware of that. So here's a statement that is attributed to Warren Buffett, that he actually knows how people think about the stock market, and he knows some of the irrational ways that investors on the whole think about their investment decisions. He bets against that, and that's how he makes a lot of money in the stock market, because he knows what everyone's going to do, where their pitfalls are going to be, so he does the other thing. So let's look at some of these examples. And I'm just going to provide a handful of examples today. And of course, this presentation will go on until tomorrow morning if we talked about all the possible examples. But I'm just going to discuss a couple that are most relevant to decision making. And the first one is hyperbolic discounting, which is a very fancy way to say that we really prefer smaller payoffs now than larger payoffs later, to the point that we can actually disregard the future because we really want to benefit from something right now. So I'm going to write this down. So do you guys have hyperbolic discounting on your paper?
Yes.
Right. So don't make me write down the long words. We prefer now over later. So I don't know if anybody heard the saying that says, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. That's no way to live. Our brain thinks that's the way to live. I have to go for a gym, I have to do the gym, I have to go for a run. Maybe I can just stay in bed or watch TV. And that is the whole point. We prefer to benefit now than to benefit later. So, yes?
Would you say System 1 prefers to benefit now as opposed to later, or do you think that both systems suffer from that?
I think System 1.
Okay.
I think System 1. Does anyone else think otherwise? Cliff?
I think one can intentionally have an attitude of disregarding everything, so there can be a little bit of System 2 in there if one believes that it is best for oneself to...
If you really subscribe to this way of life.
Yeah. I think I think that describes very few people. But
and I would agree with that. I think that describes very few people. I think if we look at the vast numbers of people who have to fight so hard to do the right thing for their future, the System 1 working against all of us. And it's really rough. I found a comment online from the CEO of the Johns Hopkins University Hospital, who says that out of all the people in the United States who undergo coronary artery bypass graft surgery, so people have heart attacks and who have serious heart disease, over 500,000 people every year. And so after that, they're being suggested to make really major lifestyle changes that I guess they didn't make them, they led them to this illness. And as we all know, it's more exercise and healthier eating, and it's so hard to change your habits. So the percentage of people who went through this really difficult surgery who make these changes is just 10%. 10% in this whole country. And 90%, for whatever reason, do we want to say they're lazy, terrible people? Or it's just very hard. It's just very hard to work against that. And they know that in the future they might have to have surgery again. They might have pains. They might die sooner than they otherwise would. Not to mention all the people who, we just go to the doctor. Doctor says, you need to start, stop eating those 3 burgers a day. And I was there, and I'm like, it was, I did not think that like in my late 20s I'd find that my doctor telling me I need to start exercising more else. And by the time I got home, I just ripped that paper up and I threw that out. I'm like, no. That's rational? Probably not. It took like several years, and I was blaming my doctor. I'm like, that's not how you tell someone that they need to change their lifestyle. Send them a little paper in the mail and say, these tests don't look very good. But like that's like a prompt example. Did I think, what would I think in my 50s? I wish that when I was 28 I would, take a walk every day. But it's really difficult, and for some reason, I wasn't the only one. 90% of people who have heart surgery still think that way. And then about 15 years ago, there was another study where they asked people, say, what would you prefer to eat this week? And 74% of the people included fruit in their plan for the week. And then they asked, what do you want to eat today? 70% of the people included chocolate. I was like, I want to do the right thing, but right now I just want a chocolate. I really want it. Can you guys think of any other examples when we kind of choose our short-term benefits over long-term benefits? Or maybe something you've experienced or your friend? Yes, Carlos.
Postponing retirement.
Oh, excellent example.
That sort of thing.
Not saving for retirement?
Yeah.
And then by the time your retirement comes, you're not in good shape and it's too late. Definitely. Did you have something, Robert?
No, I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, that's fine. So another thing to think about, again, that in the industry and outside, for example, the credit card industry really uses this to their advantage. Because they say, you would rather borrow money now and pay some incredible interest rates later. And we say, okay, many of us say, okay, because right now I can have the stuff that I want, and later I'll pay it off later. It's just $35 a month or something like that. To the point that the industry had to be regulated, so they'd be honest about how long it would take us to pay it off. Now in our bills we see, if you only make the minimum payment, you'll be paying this until your grandkids, grandkids. So this, hyperbolic discounting, this, preferring now over later. So what do you think are some ways to get over it and to prevent it from hurting our decisions in our future, after? Yes?
Not use credit cards.
Not use credit cards? Okay. Yes, Carlos?
In some cases where it's possible, just pre-committing yourself so you don't have the or I guess thinking again in terms of retirement or something like that, where you just automatically debit your account every month, every time you get a paycheck without thinking about it. You don't have to do it; it just happens automatically. So stuff like that.
It's a good idea. Yeah. Sean and Robert.
That made me
Hold
think
on.
of-
Yeah,
oh.
just a second. Sean, Robert, then Chris.
Taking like a longer term goal and breaking it into shorter term, like you were talking about, walking is good for your health. Well, go outside and get some sun. Get a suntan, look better.
Oh, so like trick yourself, like it's going to help you in the short term too.
Focus on the short term benefits that you're receiving as you make your way towards the goal.
Okay, Robert.
Yeah, like the idea of like not making a decision about it, moving it into your system one, or creating a pattern or an environment for yourself so that your system one does what you want it to, so you don't need your system two to force it.
Very
So,
good.
like the pre-commitment, you're taking it out of your hands, and then you're not thinking about it, or people set up tricks and pressures as websites that you can go to
Definitely.
pre-commit yourself to to doing things. It's why like bets for quitting smoking sometimes work and things like that. So that the benefits are powerful, overwhelming, and you're not relying on your ability to be rational in order to put off something that you want.
Yeah, another good idea. Chris,
Yeah,
please.
I think all of these comments here kind of get back to understanding what are the reasons for failure and what ought to be rational. So you're looking at little tricks. Maybe dyers would do something similar. Or if you don't want to eat hamburgers, you don't have them in the house, then you don't have to say, so understanding my limbic system is going to try to derail me, so let's not give it an opportunity.
Very good. So I think these are all excellent suggestions, and that almost went through almost everything that I had over here that I was going to pitch, but you guys are so smart. So you came up with all these good solutions. An additional idea that I would have for you is to, for example, imagine what your future self, like 20 years older, would think about this. Or maybe just a week older, or a month from now. Would you look back and wish that you did this? Or 10 years from now, would you look back and wish that you did this? And kind of imagine this like a real person. So that's like one way to do it. Another way to do it is to imagine that a friend is about to make this decision or not make the right decision. And what advice would you give your friend? Sometimes we really like giving advice, and I don't know about you, I really see it all, bright and clear in other people. And myself, it's really difficult. So if I imagine if it's some other person, I'm like, what are you doing? Don't do that, do this. And I'm like, yeah, that's the advice somebody would give. And just generally look at yourself from the outside, like from an outside perspective. What would your friend tell you? They would tell you, skip the burger, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, So, any other suggestions, any other thoughts? Yes, Mary Alice.
Just my favorite example of this, I heard from somebody else, is like when you get in your car, we used to not have things in your car to remind you to buckle your seatbelt, even though when you sit down and do your System 2 thinking, obviously buckling your seatbelt is such an easy thing to do. But the reason that you sit down in your car and buckle your seatbelt is because the thing is beeping at you, not because you're sitting there thinking, oh, I might get in a car accident, or I might do this, or I might, you have this System 1 way of just bypassing.
Yeah. But if you sit in your car and you buckle your seatbelt enough times, then it's going to be automatic. Like if I get in my car and I don't put on my seatbelt, like say if I go 2 blocks somewhere or something, I am so uncomfortable. It's just like really weird.
Right,
Yeah.
and so many cars just don't stop beeping at you.
They don't
until
stop
you do
beeping.
it.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Yes.
So one other strategy that I think is very related to self, like the future self, the outside self, and then your past self, and kind of one thing that helps me is that I remember that my current self is usually operating on System 1, while my past self was operating on System 2 when it told my current self to set a policy for myself not to do things. So for example, set a policy at buffets, take 2 plates of savory food and 1 plate of sweets, and like no more.
Not 5 plates of everything that looks, not 5 plates of everything that looks good and then regret later.
Exactly. So these policy, remembering that I should trust my past rational self more than my current System 1 hot self who is emotionally driven.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with what many people here said, is that like you kind of set a policy, but then in the moment you have to stick to it. Stick to it, so that goes together. Sean, go ahead.
So it kind of goes back to the other two that you said. What would you tell a friend? Imagine you could just tell someone, hey Gleb, I'm thinking of joining the Hells Angels. What do you think?
That's one decision.
You can actually talk to a real friend,
or that barring that try imagining a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And how they might react. I could do that with my wife. If I did that, if I told that to Chitto, she might throw something at me.
There's throwing in your family? That's interesting. Okay.
Only verbal jabs.
Well, she belongs to the Hells Angels, so.
I know, exactly.
Yeah, jabs in Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about has the fancy name, and not as fancy as the other ones, called sunken costs. The sunken costs fallacy, which is basically don't throw good money after bad. Basically all that it means. A lot of times if we invest a lot into something, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, it is so hard to give that up. Because I'm so invested in that, I can't give it up. I already spent so much on it, and I can't give it up. And our brain really goes to that. Instead of going to our future, where do we want to be? Maybe where we want to be, we can't get there if we don't let go of this other thing, no matter how much we invested into it, because we can get the time back. A lot of times we can't get the money back, but our mind is really stuck stuck in the before. It's stuck in the before where we invested, and so we can't let it go. To the point that it doesn't let us think. It seems like terrible to think of giving it up. But really, if we think about it, maybe it's worth it, and maybe it's not. But our goal should drive whether or not we give something up, and not just like our feeling so terrible about this investment. So for example, something I remember doing when I was in high school and college, I lived in Brooklyn, New York, and I had a very long commute to where I was going. So I would, walk, a few blocks to the bus, and I would wait for the bus. And there's a schedule. It says every 5 minutes, every 7 minutes. And then you're there for 17 minutes, and the bus is still not there. And I'm like, I'm going to be late. I'm going to miss my train. At what point do I just catch a cab and I pay $5 to get to the train station instead of waiting a little longer and like, is the bus coming? The bus is not coming. So like the sunken cost, I already invested the time, twice as much time as I needed. At what point do I let it go and say, I have to have some chance of getting to class, to work, whatever on time? So that's one example. So sunken cost. And it's just so hard to be like, just like cut your losses, and do what you have to do. Another thing, for example, say if you buy a movie ticket that's not refundable, say for next Saturday. Saturday comes, you don't feel like going to the movies. And you're like, I spent money on this ticket. I guess I should go. Like, I feel bad just like staying home and just like playing with my dog. Or, maybe you got invited to a party or something, or who knows. Maybe you're making a fancy recipe and you're only halfway through. So then you feel really bad that money's spent and I can't give the ticket to anyone. So that's like another example of when we're invested into the past and we can't, we like throwing, good money after bad, throwing good time, effort after bad. So it's one example. Does anyone else have any examples of like when that happens in your life or like with people around you? Yes?
Relationships that aren't quite going as well as they should, and you're
ouch.
putting all this effort, so this seems to be going well enough. Maybe I should just keep at it. Turn around.
And it would hurt so much to end it.
Stock market investments that aren't going well.
Yeah. Anyone else? Robert, please.
Sometimes, like, if it's probably a very bad example, but if I'm, like, playing a video game and I'm in the middle of a mission, and it's, like, or, like, a level or something, if it's one of those games where I can quit and go do something else in the game, it's, like, sometimes I'll just be like, and if I get really bored of this particular thing, sometimes you just be like, well, no, I have to finish it. I've already invested so much into this, into completing this, and when in fact, I would probably get more enjoyment out of the game if I were to just quit what I'm doing and then do something else.
That's a very good point. I definitely have that experience sometimes late at night, or not that late at night, looking around online, social media, click on some kind of weird link. And it's like this list, top 20 adorable dogs or something, top 20 kittens. And halfway through the kittens, I'm like, I should maybe just like move on from this. But I'm like, there's 10 more, 10 more adorable animals. It's not good. Or like watching a video, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I feel like I should finish. I'm like 3 minutes into it, but like it's just 3 more minutes. Blank out. So that's, they suck us in, and then they advertise to us, and all our time, but I mean, it happens. Yeah. Yes, please, Jamie.
He actually took my best example, which was the relationships, but also jobs.
Okay, that's good.
In both cases, my way of kind of getting myself out of it was to go, okay, 10 years from now, is this where I want to be? What got me out of a really bad relationship that lasted like 2 to 3 years, it was miserable, was to go, can I see myself being married to this person and planning kids and that sort of thing? And when the result was hell no, I'm like, okay, I need to remove myself from this.
Wow.
Regardless of how invested I feel in the situation, in the end, in the long-term end game, I'd be miserable. And I've had the same kind of experience with jobs where, it's like, I put all my time in this, I've accomplished so much, but in the end, I'm not really all that happy with it. And at some point, it makes more sense to try something new, maybe take a bit of a risk. and try something different.
Yeah, and and I think what many of these examples have in common is that we make the difficult decision, we go against our intuition of sticking with our investment for our future, for the after, I want to have a long-term relationship, I can't see it with this person, I should just stop right now, whatever it takes, so with a job, and so I think those are really great examples. Caleb?
Maintenance on things.
Uh-huh.
Like, my check engine light came on my car, and it's not a critical thing. I can just leave it, but I hate having the light on. It's a 13-year-old Honda van. Like, there's a certain point where putting money in it just isn't worth it, but we keep maintaining things long after we could just start to move to a new one or just save up for a new one.
Yeah, but I think with cars that's really hard. I've heard many people kind of say that. Yes. Hold on just a second. Yeah, hold on. Sure. Okay, Chris, then Sean. Chris, please.
Yes. Just very quickly, I was going to say, I think insurance companies take advantage of what you were just talking about. They will never call up and say, hey, that car you've got is so old, it's not worth having collision.
They'd rather keep making money off of us, of course. Agreed. Yes, Sean?
That's something kind of going back to the car thing. Something that's tripped me up is trying to fix something myself. Or trying to put something together that might be a particular guy.
So it's the investment of your time and effort.
If I just do a little bit more, and usually that's
kills me
the wire snaps and you electrocute yourself.
And once you've got it assembled, no matter how for shit your assembly is, you built it. Right. So you have to keep using it.
That's right. Those bookshelves.
Yeah.
The bookshelves that are like.
No, I was kind of missing it. I kind of cut it a little wonky.
Gleb?
So I know we're all talking about guy things. I want to talk about cooking.
Guy thing. It's a human thing we all eat.
And here's an awesome cook sitting right next to me. But anyway, I know that the times I did cook sometimes didn't turn out so well, and then I felt like obliged to eat. When really I did not really enjoy it that much, but I felt like it was like, okay, I made it a sunken cost. Like now that I am more aware of this, it would have been wiser, more rational to have just thrown it.
Yeah, but sometimes it's sad because maybe all of the time, an expensive ingredient.
Yeah.
You can try to make it into leftovers, redo it.
Sure. And then invest more. Sunken costs.
Oh my gosh.
Just cover it.
There you go.
Covered with chili sauce, sriracha. Okay. Okay.
Chitto says,
Eat it.
by that taste, remember.
What's that?
Chitto's advice when I cook something bad, she says, use that to remember by. She makes it so I eat all of it, and you remember, I won't do that again.
Oh,
She punishes you.
wow.
It's negative
I would say
reinforcement.
it works. I've been doing the same thing twice.
Oh, that's really funny. So what about examples that other people can kind of use this on us? Like one example that I thought of is gambling. Casinos, they're just set up to keep us. It's like, oh, I just lost all this money, just a little more, and I'm gonna hit the jackpot, and you just sit there, and in the end, you're out so much more money. It's so hard to walk away after you lost. It's so tempting to think you're gonna win again. Robert?
And going back to that thing with the car, I sort of feel the same way about pets as well. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're going to spend all of this money to keep a particular, cat or dog alive, when it would probably just be cheaper, easier, and probably nicer to the animal itself to just put that thing to sleep and get a new animal.
Yeah, because the animal doesn't realize that it's being treated and it's in pain, for a better future. Like humans can endure a lot of treatments.
Yeah, which is why
animals don't realize it.
Which is why most people don't think the same thing about children. I mean, I do, but I'm crazy.
All right. Yes, Gleb?
Well, I think this actually similar thing applies to the medical industry of keeping, really old people who perhaps it would benefit them for them to go, keeping them alive way past when they are in a condition to actually enjoy life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's really good data on that. Like if you ask people beforehand, if they want extraordinary measures taken to prolong their lives, like huge percentages of them say no. But then when it's not their decision anymore, when like they're not cognitively able, like their relatives are like, oh yeah, do anything you can, keep them alive, we love them so much, we can't abandon them.
Yeah.
So
Definitely, and I think that's a great topic, and there's a lot written about it, and it's a very complicated issue because like I might say, that sure, like if it looks like I'm going, just let me go. But for someone else to say that about me, like it's like, what am I, a terrible person? I'm letting my family member die, and also like you not experiencing. I think like from what I've read, which admittedly not that much about this topic, is that if we're trying to save someone, they are in a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain, but to me it feels like the right thing. Whereas if this this person could talk and they would say, just let it be over, like I'm clearly dying. So it's a very difficult issue, but definitely sunken costs, and that's I think one of the most heartbreaking examples of this. Sean, you had something else to say?
Yeah, it not happen. Doesn't happen as much anymore after all the subprime problems, but a lot of people do the same thing at their house. Well, if you just refinance and add, pay off those credit cards with your house, you'd be all right. Well, because you just keep doing it over and over again, turns out it doesn't work.
Any other examples? It's hard to let go, things that we invest in. So how do we think we can address this? How can we help ourselves detach from a past investment and really do what's best for our future?
Whenever.
Yes, Robert.
Well, I think you can. If you can reduce things to quantities, then you can actually make rational decisions about stuff. You can say, look, if this if somebody set this plate of food down in front of me, would I eat it? Or would I say no? I'm going to get carry out instead. Or then you can ask yourself, is the work plus the carry out money worth the carry out food, or is the carry out food only worth the money and not worth the effort? But the point is that the effort is wasted. So
exactly.
So reminding yourself not to count the effort is the thing. What you've already spent is already gone. So take this investment from here, right? Would I rather eat this meal for free or eat pizza for $15?
Yeah, and not consider that you just spent 2 hours.
Yeah, the 2 hours is gone.
That's
that's lost. You've already lost that.
Exactly.
So yeah,
if we can just remind ourselves.
See the chips go away.
Yeah. Sure. Hold on, Serena, you had a comment?
Yeah, it won't work with all situations,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that you can do, like when you're trying a new part-time job to see if you want to move there as full-time, is, okay, I'm going to invest this much energy into it, and then I'm done. If I don't like it, I'm not going to continue it. If I don't see myself gaining what I want to gain from it, just walk away.
That sounds like that can apply also to relationships and to various things where we can experiment, but kind of decide in advance that we're just going to be pretty aggressive and ruthless and be able to walk away if it doesn't work. That can work. Yeah, Sean?
I was going to say, think about the marginal benefits.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain for us
like
the definition of margin? We don't work in mortgage industry.
It's finance.
Finance.
So how much, again, it becomes, you have to forget about what you've invested in the beginning and think about for each unit of cost, so for each hour you wait or each hour you spend at a job, how much benefit are you going to get from that? And then the margin is the difference between the two. So think of what thing is going to give you the most benefit. Like when you're talking about the bus situation, I have that a lot in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Like, do I sit here and wait for the train to come, or do I just walk? At what point does it become better? So I stopped thinking about that and think, okay, well, it takes me this long to get there, as opposed to that. So which one is actually going to wind up getting me there the fastest? Which one has the most marginal benefit?
So you say like, okay, right now I have to be someplace in 45 minutes. Do I still wait or do I walk? Then another 15 minutes pass. Okay, now do I wait or do I walk? Is that kind of what you have in mind?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. Yes, Caleb.
For some of the hardest of them, I mean, like, bring someone with you who's not in that situation, but whose advice you still trust. Like the most extreme one, the relative. It's your relative. Seeing it rationally is going to be nearly impossible.
Yeah.
But having someone who you know, I mean, not and not a family member either, but a friend or someone who you trust to help you look at the situation through unemotional eyes.
That's really good advice. So you have to find a friend who's not like your best friend, but someone who will be able to tell you that.
Yeah.
And be honest with you.
Or with the bookshelves and interior decorations.
Someone with a ruler. That's not even close to 90 degrees. No. So, any other ideas for how to? Oh, Mary Alice, then Gleb.
I like having because for a lot of these things we have them, come up again and again. My big thing is like I'll have a couple of options when I'm going to like have to write on a paper for a class, and I'll start working on one topic, and then it ends up being horrible, and I just need to quit. But I've already spent an hour on this, and now, but it's like no, I just need to quit. So I have a story in my mind where I did that, where I quit writing one of my papers and it turned out much better. So I remind myself of that story, and I try to have those like the times when a time when I walked instead of taking the bus and I got to my thing on time. And so I try to have those like narratives to remind myself of.
So you remind yourself of when you were able to do it, and
and when it was better
good.
to throw away some
Nice.
effort.
Okay, good. Gleb was next.
A brief comment on that. So it sounds to me like what Marielle was saying is that you have the idea of sunken costs in mind, and then the idea of narratives associated with. So the concept, and then like an example, and that sounds really neat. That could probably help you remember better. What I was going to say is that the future self might also be kind of helpful here. What if you were looking at your decision from the future, and what would your future self tell your current self, to do?
Don't look at past self.
No.
Past self got you in this.
Past self, like I spend the whole morning cooking. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. So my kind of comments on this, I think they were mainly covered, is that kind of look at where you want to go, where you are. Don't look at the past, because the past is like guaranteed to make you feel bad about letting go. And again, what we're trying to do is to have the freedom to consider this. It's possible I'll decide, no, I should still wait for the train. I should still eat this mediocre dish. It's possible that we'll decide that. But the sunken costs situation can even keep us from considering it. It can make us feel terrible just thinking about it. Yes, Robert, please.
Yeah, and then that's the other thing. It's like, yeah, I could do this other thing, but it's like, it's also like, well, which one is really going to be easier for me? It's like, yeah, I could throw away this mediocre dish and make something better, but do I really want to do that? That's the other thing. It's like, it's not even that I made this, therefore I must eat it. It's like, I made this, and I don't want to go, and I really don't want to go through that effort again, just because I can eat this, I will eat this, and then I can use that other time to do something more productive.
So you decide, even though this might not be delicious, but I might not feel like going for pizza either. Or maybe the pizza costs whatever, $15, $10. Maybe right now I'd rather save this money and eat it. So it's the freedom of making this choice. Yes?
Or maybe you want to do what Sean does and do the self-punishment strategy.
Self-punishment, eat it.
Yeah, deliberately eating it as a way of punishing yourself.
Also, especially, I'm not vegetarian or anything, but especially if something contains meat, I'm far more likely to eat it even if I don't like it. Because I think this animal was raised for me to eat, and by not eating it, it's really kind of rude.
Just disrespecting the memory of this animal.
You can't bring the animal back.
So, which you describe as rude.
Well, if I kills you and then eat,
Yeah. If you killed me and ate me, my concern would not be how rude you were.
If he killed you and didn't eat you.
Go ahead and kill me, but don't be rude. Use a fork. You're raised in a barn.
The animal was raised for the express purpose of being eaten.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was killed for nothing.
Yeah, but it's it's being eaten and you're not enjoying it, then it was killed for nothing, right? It's like saying, don't waste, forcing kids to eat when they're not hungry, for saying, well, we don't want to waste the food. When I was a
kids
kid,
in Africa,
they didn't let me waste the food. I had to
Right.
finish everything on my
Right.
plate. It was like, well, it is a waste of food if you don't need it, right?
Right.
If you're shoveling it in your mouth and you're not hungry, that's a waste of food. The
Yeah.
food's already wasted,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it has to do with like approaching a situation as if you just arrived to it, without it is a perfectly rational
Yeah.
way of approaching things.
So just
Would
like
I-
not thinking
Right.
about the past, thinking about now.
If I was out of work and somebody offered me this job, would I take it or would I say no? I think I can find something better.
Uh-huh.
That's what that's the rational way to decide whether you're going to go to work today.
Yeah. Okay. So any final comments? We're going to move to a third example, third area. All right. So we did preferring now over later. We did the throwing good money after bad. Now, the next one it's the idea of anchoring. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So anchoring is the idea that we rely too heavily on our existing information or our existing point of reference. So whatever we already have in our mind, it kind of overshadows some of the other options, some of the other directions we can go, like really disproportionately. And that can really hurt us in a number of ways and preventing from doing what's good for us. So anchoring, it can deal with information, or it can deal with more like a trait or like a personality preference. So here's an example for information, like what really anchors us in information. So say you're going to buy a mattress. How often, and it's not something we buy very often, and it's very expensive. I don't know what to look for in a mattress like myself. And so we go and we see all these prices. The first store we go to, the range is say from like $1,000 to $2,000. I don't know if this is true. So you're like, okay, $1,000, good deal. $2,000, top of the line. $800, I am getting that one. Like, that's cheap. I mean, if you're kind of trying to be cost conscious, the $800 looks appealing. And not only if you're like cost conscious, it seems like a good thing to do. I can spend $200 somewhere else. I can just be proud of myself for saving money. Where otherwise we might want to be looking at their specifications, how long they're going to last, how comfortable they are. Not to mention if we went to the store across the street, their cheapest one might have been $800. If we just started shopping at the other store, $800 might not seem like such a steal. But because we just really get stuck in that, we're like, oh, that's what it is, that's the range. So as far as an example of like personal preferences and traits, for example, like, I don't go to movies. Like, I haven't been to a movie in many, many years. So, like, I just don't go to movies. I just don't. I've told myself I don't like going to the movies for whatever reason. And so if you tell me right now, like, Agnes, let's go to a movie. Serena's like, let's go to a movie. I'm like, I don't go to movies. I feel it's not a good way to spend my time. I want to keep my $10. It's like, I'm missing out on a chance. Maybe it's a good movie. Maybe Serena's fun, and she also has fun friends. So that's really keeping me from, it's really kind of limits me. Oh, I'm risk averse. Like, I don't take risks. So here's a risk. I just don't feel like taking it. Like, I don't do risks. Like, I don't do that kind of thing. Instead of just stopping and thinking, is it worth it to take a risk or not? It just prevents me from being logical because I'm so stuck in like, I never take risks or I never go to movies or whatever. So these are kind of some examples when we're anchored, we're stuck. And the anchor kind of keeps us literally from moving, from exploring, from looking around. And maybe if the anchor wasn't holding us down, maybe I wouldn't go that far. Maybe I'd be like, no, I still don't like going to movies. Let's go grab coffee or something. But we can make this decision if we're stuck, just like with the sunken costs if they keep us stuck. So that's kind of the anchoring idea. What do you guys think about it? Do you have any other ideas on where you observe this? Yes, Sean?
Retail store.
Retail store?
It was $5.99. Now it's $5.49. Ooh, that's a really good deal.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
coupons sort of insist that you do that. They show you
Yeah.
products that you wouldn't otherwise buy, and then convince you that you're getting a deal on it when you have no idea what a deal would be, you know? So if they say 20% off, it's 20% off what? You know, 20% off is something I wouldn't have spent to begin with. Is it's not a deal, right? So, but that's how they're sort of set up.
Exactly. Chris?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, you'll see anchoring in people that will specialize in a particular field in their profession. So, for example, physicians, you go to someone who's a specialty. It doesn't matter what your ailment really is. They're going to filter that through their mind and not really make a rational decision.
Caleb, you had something?
No, I mean, to go to the retail too, bonus cards. I go to Kroger because I have a bonus card. I don't look to see if it's cheaper anywhere. I don't think about where else I could buy the thing. If they sell it at Kroger, if I buy it at Kroger, well, now I've got Amazon Prime, so I buy it all on Amazon Prime. But when we have anything that connects us to a store, we shop only there.
I'm just going to make a plug. If anyone is like Caleb, who shops only at Kroger, which is what I do as well, they would give a donation to a nonprofit of your choice. I recommend the Humanist Community Center.
Well done.
So a plug. Yeah, and that, you don't have to do anything for it. They just give like a fraction of whatever you spend there. Since if you buy everything there, it might work. But yeah, but like, you kind of like, you have to go there. And they send you a coupon from Bed Bath & Beyond, $5 off. I'm like, okay, like, do I need anything? $5 off? How much money am I going to spend if I step my foot in that store? Way more than $5, or like 20% off. Dangerous stuff. Go ahead then, Robert.
Similar plug, first of all, for Amazon Smile.
Oh yeah. You can also on Amazon.
So
you can also
use
plug.
Amazon Smile. I don't think the Humanist Community of Central Ohio is set up, but the Secular Student Alliance is, and that's where I give my money. So you're welcome.
Plugs
so
everywhere.
Consider that. What I wanted to say with a specific comment is that I've noticed that it's so talking about shopping, but kind of a broader pattern for where and how one shops. So when I used to be a graduate student, I had a very kind of frugal style of shopping, and so I bought like the crappiest stuff that would wear out, within
Your clothing, you mean?
my clothing, furniture, whatever that would wear out and would get destroyed. But it's like, okay, I was a graduate student. I couldn't afford much better, and and as I have a little bit more of an income, I can afford to buy better things, but I still have that very frugal mindset. So it's taken me a while to try to buy things that are longer lasting and better in quality, which would actually be better for me in the long term.
Save more money. Yeah.
Save more money in the long term, or maybe be more comfortable and cause me to be healthier physically and kind of, so things that would actually benefit me and my goals, but would actually be more expensive. So it took me a long time to kind of, I am still very, kind of frugally oriented, but, I'm increasingly realizing that it's beneficial for me to change some of my shopping habits in order to buy longer lasting, more comfortable things.
So to like consider spending a little more on that mattress that you will have forever.
Yeah.
Not just because, I save $100 over the next like 10 years. So, okay.
Yeah, people are like this with like auto mechanics. They say, I recommend this auto mechanic. I've been going to him for 20 years, so he definitely won't rip you off. Well, if you've been going to him for 20 years, how do you know he's not ripping you off? You haven't been. I mean, and this is true. Like you get this, so maybe it's better that they don't know, because then they would have this sunk cost problem after wasting money on this guy. Or it's, also with like doctors or any person that you're bound to be loyal to, if you somehow get anchored in the idea that's the norm. You set that as a standard in your mind without ever questioning it or evaluating it.
Yeah, or if you have a favorite taxi driver.
Yeah, those are other things.
If you don't have a favorite taxi driver, you can have one right now.
Yeah, you can call me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you are a favorite taxi driver.
Yeah, that is so true.
So now, also, what do you think are some ways to kind of work against this, like anchor holding us down in like an anchor of information, or an anchor like in our behavior or preference? Like, how do we give ourselves permission? How do we give ourselves a chance to think if like we might be better off differently?
I think this has got to be one of the hardest, because in some ways it goes to who we think we are. It's like, you're the person who doesn't see movies. Or you know people who don't have television, and they're the person who doesn't watch television. And so you try to get them to watch something, but they're so invested in who they are.
They would give up a little bit of who they are.
Yeah, by doing it. Or like my mechanic, he's my guy. I mean, maybe I put his kids through college, but he's happy to see me.
Yeah.
And you would be like a traitor, like going looking for someone else.
Yeah.
Oh.
He might find out I'm going to other mechanics.
That time.
Monogamous mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That time I went to get my haircut at the same place where my coworker went, true story, and I would go every few months, and then I'm like, oh, I just need to try something new, and I had a friend who was doing it like in her house, a little cheaper, and I'm like, don't tell her that I'm going somewhere else. Of course she did. You know, my new friend got it wrong, but it's like, you're looking for other people. I'm like, maybe I should just never go back and see you again. For the dirty looks you're gonna give me. Chris, you had something? And then
Oh, I was just gonna, well, like with you, finding someone else to cut your hair, you know, who wasn't even in a store or anything. The idea of changing your frame of reference, just purposely saying, I need to completely change my frame of reference.
Cut it off.
And look at this problem from a completely different angle.
Mm-hmm. Over here, Mary Alice and Robert.
I find that I think big thing with this is I have a really hard time changing my style of clothes. Like, it's just very difficult for me because it's how I think of myself. You know, I think of myself as wearing these type of clothes, but I'm like, I know I need to like not just wear black all the time. Like, I need to have something else, but it's very difficult for me to step outside that. So I actually realized today I need to take people with me to go shopping. Be like, this is nice. This is a good thing, you know.
So like have an outside person
Yeah,
who would
having an
support
outside.
you in your new thing. And
Right.
great job today with the colors.
Yeah, there we go. My one pink jacket.
Yeah, okay, Robert.
Yeah, and the second opinion is the idea is you just have to trying to be like the person that always asks yourself why, or anytime you place a value or recognize yourself as valuing something, to ask yourself the question why. Why do I think this is better than that? You know that, and if your reason is you know, I've always done this, or if that's the first one I saw, or you know, then that definitely should.
They can keep you stuck or limited.
Yeah,
Gleb?
exactly.
Yeah, Gleb?
I think this relates to the same sort of approach that's used for the now over later, or the from good money after bad, the outside perspective. I mean, the outside perspective is crucial for all of these. And if you were looking outside from yourself, or if you were imagining a wise friend giving advice, if I was imagining, you know, Og giving me advice, like what would Og say? You know, maybe have that, you know, WWA, yes.
What would he say if I gave him cookies first? Right, your friend.
Yes. So, you know, what would an outside wise advisor tell me? Or what would my future self tell me? You know, all of these things to ask myself that, you know, and as a way of thinking, oh, okay, realizing that there's an anchor that may not be serving me well.
Yeah, so outside perspective. I also like what we said, why? 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 Why do I want to make that decision? You know, I personally feel like asking ourselves why and trying to answer honestly can get us through so many difficult decisions and difficult situations, many more than we realize. And outside perspective is a good option. I know people had many good suggestions. And I'm just putting this one up here because it's the shortest and kind of very, I think, provides a lot of utility for just 3 letters. 3 letters of the alphabet. Yes, Dan?
This is my first time here, so I don't know if this has already been covered, but from what I'm hearing, I mean, the decision making should be done in system 2.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what you said just a second ago about anchoring being part of who we are, that would be system 1. So I think the whole idea, what we're doing here is essentially, I mean, all the tips and everything is teaching ourselves how to be aware that we're in System 1, and then whatever methods we use to go into that System 2 thinking. So just being aware of every decision that you have to make.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great summary. That's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing, and welcome to your first time here. It's what we do every other week. It's what we do every other week. I'll get to you in a moment. That how hard is it to get out of System 1? It's really hard. We don't even realize it's there, but it's doing all this stuff to us. That's really, not ideal. Not ideal. It prevents us from doing things, prevents us from reaching our goals, and it's hard to go from here to there. And that's exactly, I think that's a really great point on a lot of what we talk about, is how to engage System 2, especially at the most important times. Carlos?
In Daniel Kahneman's book, he talks about the times that we're really going to need System 2 to intervene are the times that we're not going to have it intervene. The times when we're stressed out, we're making very important decisions, when fear is involved, things like this, and
the emotions, right?
Yeah, and emotions.
Yeah.
And I actually, I don't think this is absolute. I think what we're talking about here actually does work to a certain extent. But I'm wondering about this other possibility. So far we've basically said two things. One is identifying when System 1 is at work, when we need to make important decisions, and switching over to System 2. The other thing we talked about is automating our decisions, which is basically essentially taking our decision making out of it and having things happen automatically. I'm wondering about a third possibility. I don't know if anyone's talked about this or looked into this, but what about, is there a way to train System 1 so that it behaves in a more optimal way? You mentioned earlier something about practicing the violin. You do that a number of hours, pretty soon your motor memory is, you've got these songs in your head, and it wouldn't take very much to get that network to recall that, even if you haven't played in a long time.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. I used to play piano, and I haven't played a piece in like 5 years or something, and I can kind of sort of play it without even looking at the sheet music. I'm like, my fingers, they're playing, so I can relate to that. So I know Gleb has a comment. My response would be that it is possible with a lot of work over time, but we're not going to train the whole of System 1. We can train some of it. Like, for example, I am risk averse, so that was a true example. Like, to the point someone gives me free ice cream, and my first reaction is like, no. Like, what's wrong with me? Sometimes it really kind of gets the best of me. So I try to train myself anytime there's some kind of an opportunity, I say yes. And I train that to be my first reaction, or I train myself not to respond quite yet, give it a few seconds, and then try to say yes. Try my darndest. And so over time it's becoming a little easier. Maybe in 3 years we can check in and see where that went. So I would say that it's possible partially to some extent, but System 1 is so vast that we cannot do it to everything. And it's also so hard to retrain ourselves. It takes so much willpower, although I think it's definitely worthwhile for certain questions. What do you think, Gleb?
I would very much identify with that it is possible and it is very difficult. And one of the things that I think we do here at Rationality is kind of figure out the specifics of what could be done. So remembering these things, the now related, from good money to bad, and the anchoring, and the specific strategies that are there. For each of us, I think each of us has more problems with certain things than others of these, or it may show up in our life differently. So to know the particularities of what we're most suffering from or what we can most work on, and to work on those specific things, like Agnes was saying about the risk and reward. Now, there are deliberate ways of doing that, practicing that on individual level. So I do that through mindfulness meditation. That's what works for me kind of, and that effortful meditation, guided visualizations of various sorts. And that's something that has worked for me. For other people, I know they do it, like Agnes was saying, just kind of practicing it deliberately. One thing I mentioned earlier is setting deliberate policies for oneself. So automating those policies and making them, starting them in System 2, then they would translate into System 1. But yes, those are specific ways of fixing specific things as I notice that they are problematic in my life.
Would you be willing to elaborate a little bit on how you use mindfulness meditation to change something specifically, and
Sure.
And in particular, does it actually change your System 1 so that your automatic response is the optimal response?
Yes, that is exactly what it does. So it involves, so one way of doing it that's been pretty effective is slowing down my response time to notice when I am reacting emotionally to something and not reacting as emotionally to things. So for example, previously I was very kind of aggressive when people would cut me off in traffic. And I have deliberately trained myself to be much less aggressive toward when people cut me off, and to be much more tolerant and patient of doing so, by remembering how negative it is for me to actually do the aggressive thing and actually be aggressive, deal with the aggressive response. And the visualization involves basically imagining a scenario and imagining how I want to act in that scenario versus how I currently act, and then associating positive emotions with acting it in the optimal way. So meditating on that. We could talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your System 1 continually changes through your life, and that's why as you gain more experience, you get to be a better decision maker. It's not because you become more rational, it's because your experiences alter the heuristic that you're using in your System 1, so you can prompt that with your, that's what, your System 2, evaluating that and being aware of that automatically changes that, and knowing, what's funny is that knowing, I think, is the only way to change it, but knowing it is not sufficient to change it. It seems like you have to train yourself to do it. It's the difference between knowing something and then training your heuristic. When something happens, you automatically form a belief about it. And certain people are able to say, well, that's the belief. I think in some cases I can say I don't have enough information to say whether or not that belief is correct or not. That I need this other information. So I can do that sometimes. Other times I'm just prejudiced, I guess, or I'm overwhelmed by emotion, or my experience has given me something I don't need to think about. I know that. It's why I think it's also a mistake to say that making bad decisions, you made a bad decision when you don't get what you want. Because I think that's incorrect. I think that you can make a good decision and still not get what you want, over and over again. So how you make decisions maybe is needs to be based on some kind of standard of likelihood, right? And then an acceptance that sometimes you're just not very lucky,
And I think that, like, how you make decisions, if I did my very best and I made the very best decisions, I read about all these kind of biases and, errors that I might make. Sometimes no matter how good you try, life's not fair. We've all learned this by now, and things just might not work out. Doesn't mean it was a bad decision. You can still do really good effort, get a bad decision. It wasn't necessarily a bad decision, it was just a bad outcome. And also I want to comment on what was said, that our brains do change, and we can even affect System 1. We can definitely change our System 2. And so I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. And for possibility for how much better we can get at this stuff. And it's not like, oh, we're doomed. Well, most of my brain is just doing stuff I don't even realize, 99% of the time. Throw my hands up in the air, eat a gallon of ice cream, you know, we can try. I ate a gallon of ice cream yesterday, but today's my chance to not do that. Did you have a follow-up comment?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've talked about before is sort of pat yourself on the back when you realize you're wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because realizing that you're wrong is, you know, should be something that you reward yourself for. You know, you know, because being wrong feels just like being right. You know, until you realize that you're wrong, and then you really are right. You know, so yeah, so being the kind of person that can evaluate yourself and your decisions and your knowledge, and say, you know, oh, I noticed I'm mistaken. I'm correct.
Sort of like the whole.
I'm confused.
Sort of like the whole. You don't learn anything when you win an argument.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't learn. Yeah, only the loser wins.
Okay, so to go back, so that's a great point, and I see we're starting to be a little short on time. So just some additional thoughts that I had on how to overcome that anchoring that we have. I think some of these were already stated. Think about your goals. Think about where you want to go. I think a lot of it is being aware, self-aware about your emotions, about your preferences. Like being aware that, you know, I only own black clothes. Next time I have a chance to acquire something black, maybe it might be a problem. You know, unless you like black. But if you decided that you want to, you know, a few more colors, you know, your self-awareness of your preferences, of your emotions, of maybe certain triggers that you have. You know, anytime I don't visit my parents, they get really, really mad, or I don't call them. Like, ugh. But I can have choices. I can free myself from that emotion and really, you know, let system 2 do more of the work. And also connected to these preferences is this idea of overshooting. So if I'm really risk averse and I have an opportunity and I want to detach myself from this risk aversion, I'm going to try to take that risk. I'm not going bungee jumping, but, you know, I'm gonna go to a movie. I'm gonna, you know, consider buying a TV, you know, and changing who I am. Because if I just think, oh well, I'll just do a little bit, I'm so stuck in this anchor that I need to make this extraordinary effort to have a chance. It doesn't kind of makes, you know, it might not feel that way to me. To me, it might feel, oh, I'm doing enough. I'm taking a little risk. But think about yourself. You're so risk averse, you need to do a lot more to actually shift, to actually have movement. So these are like 3 things that I want to cover. Next, we're going to talk about some strategies, additional strategies to overcome these. And also, I wanted to say that what we talked about, kind of other people using this, you know, to their benefit. There's a video on the HCCO. HCCO has a YouTube channel, and you can look it up. There's a video called Defense Against the Dark Arts that's offered by Jesse Galiff, who is a well-known figure in kind of the rationality community, and he talks about how to defend yourself against people using this against you. So if it's of interest, he gave a talk in this room about a year ago. So now I'm going to do a brief exercise, and I'm going to ask you guys to look back at the notes you took at the beginning, some of the decisions you made, some of the decisions you're thinking about, and find a partner, and talk for a few minutes about how you think some of these thinking errors might have affected your previous decisions, and about how they might affect your upcoming decisions. So take a few minutes to talk about that. Yeah, so does anybody want to share a couple of thoughts of anything that they found, of their past decisions, how any of these things might have played a role, or in their future decisions?
I guess I'm going to say anything. This is not a decision, but it's a decision you've been putting off. Like how to deal with coworkers. And best I can figure, it's kind of the anchor. I have this little box for them. She is the lady that watches, you know, Fox News and blathers on about that sort of thing. That becomes my frame of reference for her, so it kind of causes me problems because I don't let her outside of that little box, even though she bakes, so she can't be all that bad.
Okay.
She bakes.
She bakes, so she's not all that bad. But it kind of, you think, it sounds like it prevents you from some of the different ways to, like, approach her or interact with this person.
Right.
Because you boxed her in, okay? Anybody else, please?
It seems like smaller decisions are a little more easy to pin down, like big decisions like, should I have gotten married? It's like, if I hadn't gotten married, I wouldn't be divorced and everything would be great. You know, it's just impossible to say, you know?
Yeah.
I could have not gotten married and married someone worse, or I could have, you know, I could have gotten married and, you know, what, you know, you see what I'm saying? It's
It
like
can be hard.
big decisions,
Yeah.
it's almost pointless to evaluate them, but like, should I have gone to work Friday night and made the extra money, or should I stay home and sleep? You know, that's a little easier to dig out, you know?
Yeah.
Say, this was the benefit, this would have been the benefit,
Mhm.
this was the result, this would have been the, you know, assuming that you know what the result would have been.
Yeah. But again, remember, we talked about how the decision was made.
Right.
And if it helped us get to kind of the future situation and our goal. So it is tricky.
Right,
in
because
past
it's about
things.
how you made the decision, not
Exactly.
about the result.
It's how you made the decision.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can, because how you make the decision is up to you. Sometimes it's up to your system one, so you want to free yourself from some kind of undesirable effects, so that it is mostly up to your system two. But what happens after, it can be up to anyone. You know, snowstorm, you know, you plan the best event, but there's like a blizzard, you know, it's not, the outcome is not always up to you. You know, your event fails,
Right.
but you did everything right. So one more comment, anybody? Or we move on?
I have a question. Well, what do you think, I'm sorry, so what do you think is there like a, you know, there should almost be like a checklist, you know, of what I can ask myself to say, was I prepared to make a decision? You know, did I have I can think off the top of my head, did I have the information? Was I motivated by, you know, irrational things like, you know,
I think that's a
fear
very
in the
good
moment,
point.
you know,
Yeah.
or, I mean, have you heard of anything like that?
Well,
or-
first of all,
we
online
make
you can
one?
look up something called the Rationality checklist. You
Yeah,
can look it
yeah.
up. I'll let you look it up. So that has some suggestions. Another one, I think, right now, all of you had really good ideas for things we can do. And we just covered 3 common errors out of, you know, probably over 100. And some of those, as you noticed, overlapped. So you can make your own checklist. You can put it on a little index card or whatever it may be, and kind of remind yourself, you know, just stop and ask yourself, why am I making this decision? Stop and ask yourself, you know, what would my future self, you know, 10 years later or a year later suggest, or what would a friend suggest? So some of these do really overlap. So as far as a checklist, you can kind of create your own practice, I think, and I think that's a good point. So we're going to move on, and we're going to look at some additional strategies that were not yet discussed. And has anyone heard of the post-mortem? What's a post-mortem? What?
Like examine a decision after you made it. It's like an autopsy.
It's like an autopsy of your decision, especially if something went wrong. Like, gee, we planned this gala, half the people didn't show up, or something happened wrong, the whole team sits and thinks, or some kind of a project, you know, had some hits, had some misses, and you think about it afterwards. And it's a very common practice in project management, businesses, organizations of all sorts. So now what I would suggest to you is a pre-mortem. Before the project, before your decision, before the situation arises, sit and imagine that it went wrong, that there was a problem later. If you're doing it in a team, it's probably better to do this as an individual, quiet exercise, so everyone comes up with their own ideas, but you can also do it on your own, in your own personal life. You know, I planned to go on this vacation, and it went terribly wrong. So imagine that it failed, and think of what caused it to fail. You know, what are some of the things that, you know, that caused the problems? Of course, that can be really painful. You're like, oh, this caused it to fail. I don't want to think about it because that means I might be doing it. It may be top of mind. You know, this thing, didn't want to think about it because I'm so afraid it will hurt my project or my plan. But, you know, if you're brave enough, if you're courageous enough with yourself, you can do it. Think of why it failed, and think of how you can prevent this problem. And then move ahead with your project, preventing some of the things that you thought might cause it to fail. Yes?
Might also be a wise idea to, if you decide it is likely to fail, to disengage from the project.
Yeah, and you can make all sorts of decisions, and it depends on the project, of course. If it's a project is optional, like I'm getting married to this person. Why might this marriage fail? Maybe you don't get married, but like sometimes you don't have a choice, or you choose not to have a choice. You choose that the project is valuable. So we're going to do the pre-mortem. I'm not short enough to write on the bottom of the board. And another example that's kind of related to it is to look to the future and imagine what might happen in the future. Not just think like, oh, what are all the things that are going to fail, but just like, what are some of the possibilities for the future? And not like predict what happens, but what are the distinct things that are possible? Maybe they're likely, maybe they're not very likely. Let's think of an example. I'm going on a road trip. What's possible? I'm going to have a fantastic time. What's possible? I'm going to blow a tire. I'm going to run out of cash. I'm going to have so much fun in one destination. I'm going to want to stay there an extra day or something. I'm going to meet a wonderful person that I'll want to, date or something. My dog will get sick. My kid will get lost. I don't know. Hopefully not. So you kind of think about these scenarios, and then you think what you would do, how you would address them if they would happen. And that would kind of give you a framework for thinking about the future and to kind of be also prepared for the future. You can forecast your own future, basically, based on your past experience. What kinds of things might happen. You can just take a little more time, imagine that they would happen and how you would deal with them. And so it won't be, I guess, in a way, it won't be as much of a surprise. In a way, you would be maybe a little better prepared. And even if none of those happen, you have a new take on the whole situation, on your future. Do you have a comment?
Yes, I think like an additional helpful component of that might be that as you figure out those scenarios, you might actually take steps to prepare for them. So, and one neat thing, about the rationality that I want to mention is that in the summer, starting from in June, we'll have a series of workshops on how to prepare for emergencies and disasters of various sorts.
Okay, so we'll have meetings here about
We'll have meetings here about emergencies and disasters, long-term, short-term. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. But
unless it's a tornado one.
yes, indeed.
Or power outage for 5 days, like
which we're prepared for, and we'll delay the meetings until later. But in general, just for doing the scenarios to actually take active steps to prepare for various contingencies, not only think about them.
Right. Right. And so I think the future scenarios. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, so with the future scenarios, something that can be kind of useful, and actually, we beat up on System 1 a lot, but it's just kind of a way to use System 1 to help, is you can vividly imagine failure states, and if you're surprised at the failure state, then maybe don't worry about it so much, because it's probably relatively unlikely. But if you're not surprised at the failure state, then that's a failure state you really want to pay attention to. If you think about oh, well, will I actually go to the gym 3 times next week? If next Sunday I think about it, I imagine myself, and if I haven't gone 3 times, am I going to be surprised? No, I'm not going to be surprised. That's a failure state you really want to think about.
That's a good point. So basically, if you're thinking in a pre-mortem, you're like, oh, this one went wrong. Oh, I would totally not be surprised if that went wrong.
Yeah. Whereas
you
if it's
want to
something
do something about it.
Yeah, my gym burned down. You'd be pretty surprised about that. But
it's okay if you skip your workouts the week the gym.
Right. Yeah.
But if it's oh, I was too busy, chatting to my friend, or going to that movie, it's you could have prepared for that.
Yep.
And then you would have gone to the gym, whatever you wanted. That's a very good point.